Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to speak about the new update that happened in Power BI in September 2025, which is adding user-defined functions. So this allows you to create a function that you can use in different measures over and over again. And this greatly eliminates repetitive work because there will be calculations that you might want to do in different measures. So instead of writing a long formula in each and every measure, you just use a pre-built function to perform that calculation. And we're going to see three different examples of varying difficulty to illustrate how to use the new user-defined functions in DAX. So first of all, how do we enable UDFs in Power BI? First, make sure you have the latest version of Power BI installed, and then you can go to settings, so file and options and settings, or you will see this gear icon here as well. You can click on it. So if you do that, this will take you to the options and settings, and then you can go to the preview features tab here, and you should have DAX user defined functions here. So you just need to check that and press OK, and then restart Power BI, and this will enable user-defined functions on your Power BI desktop. All right, so now we're going to have some examples on creating UDFs or user-defined functions in DAX. So to create a user-defined function, you can do that in the DAX query view or the TMDL view. We're going to do it in the DAX query view, and to create a function, you need to write define and then function. All right, and I'm going to create a function to add a certain amount, let's say 10% of tax to a value. So in this case, you can feed it, for example, a sales amount measure, and then it will add 10% on top of that as tax. Or you can feed it a freight or shipping amount, and it will add 10% of tax over that as well. And you can always, of course, change that percentage that's going to be added from 10% to 15, 20, whatever you would like to add. So the name of the function, I'm going to make it fn add tax. This is going to be the name of my function here. All right. And we're going to write equals. And of course, it's not mandatory to have this fn prefix. It's just a good practice for people to understand that it's a function. And we're going to write equals, and then what you need to do is to open a bracket here and start defining the parameters for this function. So gonna define the first parameter as amount, and then colon, and then you need to define the data type for that. You can type, for example, val, and this will accept any value, whether a text or number, whatever. But the data type I'm going to use here is numeric. Okay, because this will only accept numbers. All right, so this is more restriction because, of course, we don't want the user to enter anything but a number here. And we're going to close the bracket here, and then we're going to type an equal sign and then a greater than sign. So now we're starting to define our function. I'm going to press Shift and Enter just to start typing on a new line. It's not mandatory or anything, but it's just to keep everything neat and clean. And then our result, I'm going to create a variable here for our result. Var result is going to be equal to the amount that we have here as a parameter multiplied by 1.1. For example, I want to add 10% tax. All right, and then I'm going to return my result. So this is a very simple function that is going to allow me to add 10% extra to whatever amount I give it. All right, so I'm going to click on Update Model with Changes, and I'm going to click on Update Model. And if we go to the TMDL view, we'll find here under the functions that our fn add tax function has been added. All right, so let's go to the report view, and let's create a new measure, actually. So let's click here on the measures, new measure, and we're gonna create a measure sales with tax, for example. All right, so sales with tax, and this is going to be equal to, we're going to use the fn add tax function, and we're going to feed it the sales amount measure. All right, and let's close the bracket and press enter, and we have this measure created. So let's actually just create a simple table, and we're going to put a year here from the calendar table, and I'm gonna put the sales amount. All right, so we have a calendar table connected to our sales table here, and then I'm gonna add the sales with tax here, and let's just increase the font size for everything to be clear and visible. All right, so as you can see here, now we have the sales with tax as 10% extra here from from the sales amount, right? So we have 10% extra over the sales amount as sales with tax. So this is a very simple function, and this is our first example. We can also use that function to add the tax as well to the freight amount, for example. So we have another measure here called the freight amount, which is simply the sum of the freight column on the sales table. So we can create a new measure that is called freight with tax. All right, and this freight with tax measure, we're going to use the fn add tax function, and we're going to feed it the freight amount, and now as you can see here, after we drag it and drop it, we have the freight with tax, which is 10% extra over the freight amount. So it's just adding 10% extra. If you would like to change that, to change the amount, the extra amount that is being added, you can go to the TMDL view, and then under the functions, click on these three dots here and click on script TMDL2 and then script tab. And here you're going to have the function. So I could change that to 1.2, for example, to add 20% instead of 10%, and then click on apply. And now the changes have been applied. If we go back, you'll see that the amounts have now changed to 20% extra tax instead of 10% extra. So you can see here that the changes that you make get applied to all the measures that you use the function in, which is actually superb. The next function that we're going to create is to calculate the lifetime value of a measure. So we're going to go to our DAX query view here. We're going to create a new query, and we're going to define a function. All right, and we're going to call this function FNLTD. All right, and this is going to be equal to, and we're going to feed this function a measure. So we're going to create a parameter called underscore measure, but you can name it anything. It doesn't matter. But the more important thing is to make this parameter an expression so that it gets affected by the filters that we're going to have in the formula, right? Because we don't want it to be a constant value. And we're going to see that when we write the formula. All right, so we're going to close the bracket here, and then we're going to write an equal sign and then a greater than sign. So now we're starting to type our formula here, and we're going to have a variable called, we're going to write the result variable, and this function will be equal to calculate. We're going to calculate the measure that we fed to the function. So we're going to feed that measure to the calculate function here. This is the measure parameter that we have. And for this measure, we're going to remove all filters on the calendar table. And we're going to add another filter that the date column on the calendar table is less than the maximum value of the date column on the calendar table. And the maximum value is basically going to capture the maximum date in the current filter context. So this measure will be calculated for all dates on the calendar table that are less than or equal to the maximum date in the current filter context. And here comes the value of making this measures data type an expression, or this inputs or parameters data type an expression, right? Because then it's going to be affected by the filters that we have here in the calculate function. But if this is, for example, a numeric, so it will be a constant value, so it won't be affected by the filters that we have here in calculate. So this is very important, all right? And we're going to return the result here. So this is going to be our function to calculate the lifetime value of a measure. And we're going to update the model with changes. So it's been updated. If you go to the TMDL view, you'll find that we have this FNLTD function here under the functions folder. And we're going to go back here to the report view, and we can create a measure that is called Sales LTD. For example, all right, so Sales LTD is going to be equal to FN LTD, and we're going to feed that the sales amount measure. All right, and let's actually just remove these measures. I'll just keep the year here on this table, And actually, let's also keep the sales amount as a reference. So we're going to add the sales LTD, and sales LTD here, let's make it just a dollar and with 0 decimal places. And as you can see here, now we're getting a lifetime to date calculation. So it's a cumulative calculation. So for the first year, 2010, the sales amount is the same as the sales LTD. But then for the second year here, for 2011, the sales LTD is the summation of 2010 and 2011. And then for the third year, for 2012, the amount is the summation of 2010, 2011, and 2012. So it's a cumulative calculation, and it just keeps accumulating. And then, of course, the last value that we have here is the total sales for all the years, right? Because it's a cumulative calculation that always keeps accumulating. So this is the second example we're showing here on how to use UDFs in Power BI. So this cumulative calculation or lifetime to date calculation function can be used with any measure. You can calculate the lifetime to date value for any measure that you have. So this is super useful. Our next example is to create a function to calculate the number of customers in a certain age bracket. So we're going to feed it that age bracket, the two age thresholds. So for example, we can feed that function 40 and 60, and it will get us the number of customers between 40 and 60 years old, for example. And if we check our data model, we're going to have here in the customers table, we have the birth date column. And this customers table, of course, is connected to the sales table via a one-to-many relationship. So we have this birth date column, and we have the customer key column that we're going to use as well. All right, so let's go to the DAX query view, and let's create a new query, and we're going to create a new function here. So we're going to define a function, and this function, let's call it FN customers in age bracket. All right, so we're going to feed it the age bracket, which is going to be a minimum age, right? So this is going to be the minimum age parameter, and this parameter will be an int64 because it's going to be an integer, right? An integer value like 40, 60, whatever. And we're going to also feed it a max age. So these two parameters here, and these will be integers, both of them. And then we're going to add here, close the bracket, and add equals and then greater than sign. So now we're starting to create this function. So for this function, we're going to define a variable that is called today date. So this variable will capture today's date using the today function, so as to be able to calculate the age correctly, right? So it's going to capture today's date using the today function, and we're going to create a result variable here. So for this result variable, we're actually going to use the summarize function to summarize the customers table, all right? And we're going to use the customer key column on the customers table and also the birth date column. So we're going to create a summarized table using the customer key column, which is a unique identifier of the customer, and the birth date. And we're also going to create a calculated column here, which is the age. And for this age column, we're going to define this age column by using an if statement here. And we're going to go actually row by row in that table. So we're gonna use the row context here to we're gonna check if the date created using the year of today's date and the month of the customer's birth date, and also the day of the customer's birth date as well. We're gonna check if the date created using these dates. So we're using the date function here to build a date that is the year of today's date. So for example, the date will be 2025 as the year, and then the month will be whatever the month of the customer's birth date is. So let's say it's August, so it's going to be 8, and then the day, let's say the customer is born on the 12th of August, let's say. So the date created will be 12th of August 2025, for example. All right, and so we want to check if this date that we created is greater than today's date, right? Because if it's greater than today's date, then the customer's birthday has come already, right? So the customer, so if this is the case, how we want to calculate the customer's age, right? Because this, we're now calculating the customer's age. So how we want to calculate the customer's age is a simple calculation of getting the year of today's date and then subtracting from that the year of the customer's birth date, right? So this is going to be the age calculation in that case. If this is not the case, so if the customer's birth date has not come, if the date created by the year of today's date and the month of the customer's birth date and the day of the customer's birth date is not greater than or equal to today's date, then the calculation for the age will be today's date minus the customer's birth date minus the year of the customer's birth date minus 1, because the customer's birthday has not come for this year, for the year 2025 that we're in, for example, right? And so this is going to be the calculation, and we're going to close our if function here, and then we're also going to close the summarize function. So let's close the summarize function as well. All right, and let's just work on the indentation here a bit. All right, and let's make that more indented a bit more so it's more readable. All right, and we can always format it later. All right, so this is going to be a table that has the customer key and the birth date and the age, right? And then what we want to do is to filter this table. So I'm going to filter this table, and I'm going to filter it by the customer's age, the age column, greater than or equal to the minimum age that we have. We're going to filter it by the minimum age that we have, and so it's by the age being greater than the minimum age that we have, and also the age being less than or equal to the maximum age that we fed as a parameter here. All right, so we're going to close the bracket here for the filter function that we have as well. So this is going to be our function here, and what we want to do to get as and what we want to return as a result is simply the count rows of that table that we created as the result here, right? So this result variable will contain a table, right? And this table will be simply the customer's ID or customer's key, right? Customer key and the birth date and the age of the customer, the age, right? And of course, this will contain all our customers because customer key is the unique identifier, and it will contain all our customers without repetition. So, and it will be filtered as well. This table will be filtered with whatever minimum age and maximum age we feed here. So let's say we feed it 40 and 60. So this will be the customers between 40 and 60. And then if we count the rows of this table, we'll get the number of customers between falling in that age bracket 40 and 60, for example. So let's update the model with changes. And now we've created this function. And let's create a new measure here, and we're going to make it customers between 40 and 60 is equal to fn customers in age bracket, and we're going to feed it 40 and 60 here, which is our age bracket. And if we drag and drop that, we're going to get the number of customers that are between 40 and 60 years old, as you can see here. Now we can always change that. So let's say we want to get the number of customers between 50 and 60, then we can just change the inputs here, and we'll get the number of customers between 50 and 60, which are 5,943 customers in this case. And just to check that our result is correct, we're actually going to create a calculated column on the customers table and count the rows here. So I'm going to copy this if formula part, and I'm going to go to the table view here. And on the customers table, I'm going to create a new calculated column here, and I'm going to call it age. So this part here will calculate the age. I'm going to create a variable called today date, and this variable here will be to calculate the date of today's date using the today function, and then the result is going to be equal to, and we're going to create a result variable here, and this is going to be the result variable, and then we're going to return the result. And let's just put this at the beginning. All right, and this is going to be the formula to calculate the customer's age, as you can see here. And now let's just filter for greater than or equal to 50, for example, and less than or equal to 60. All right, and click OK. And the number of rows that we have here is 5,943 rows. And this confirms that this number is correct. All right, so that's it for today's video. UDFs are a great feature. It has some limitations at the moment, and you can read about them on the page on Microsoft's website that speaks about UDFs as a new feature in Power BI. But one of the limitations so far is that they can't work on the Power BI service so far. So hopefully this can get fixed in the future, and they were able to use them on the Power BI service. But I think that they are a great feature that is going to allow us to save a lot of time. And before we conclude the video, I'd like to give a shout out to Alberto Ferrari from SQL BI and Win Hopkins from Access Analytics, as they were, I think, the first ones to create a video about the new UDFs, and their videos helped me greatly to understand how UDFs work. So shout out to them. And this concludes our video today. So if you found the video helpful, please make sure to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel and ring the bell icon to be notified with all future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.